The fleet slowly moved closer to the energy field, the tension in the air palpable. Every ship, every member of the delegation felt the weight of the moment. This was the critical point. They had come so far, had risked so much, and yet the greatest mystery of all lay just ahead. Earth, the birthplace of humanity, was shrouded in this field, this strange, alien pulse of energy. It was as if Earth itself was rejecting them. Suddenly, without warning, the fleet commander's voice crackled through the comms. "We've lost contact with the outside world. The energy field is disrupting our communication systems. We cannot make any transmissions. We are isolated." The words hit like a physical blow. A sense of helplessness washed over Volok and the other council members. They had been so certain, so sure that they could find answers, that they could make contact with the humans, but now they were isolated in a way they had never imagined. The power of this field was beyond their understanding. It was shutting them out, keeping them from reaching Earth, keeping them from reaching the very people they had once relied on. "This is madness, Taylor," the representative from the Yulthar Federation said quietly, her voice trembling. "What is happening? Why can't we get through?" "There's no other choice," Silex said, his voice hard. "We need to enter the field. We must learn what humanity is hiding before it's too late." As the fleet cautiously approached the energy barrier, the surrounding space seemed to vibrate with an overwhelming power. Each ship within the fleet could feel the pressure mounting as the energy pulses grew stronger. It felt like the very fabric of the universe was twisting around them. The stars beyond the field seemed to blur and shimmer, their light distorted by the unseen force. And yet, they pressed on, their ships moving slowly into the heart of this strange, dangerous phenomena. "We're going in," Volok said with grim determination, though his heart raced. They had no other choice. The galaxy's survival rested on what they would find behind the energy field. If humanity had turned its back on the galaxy, if they had decided that nothing was worth saving, then the consequences would be unimaginable. As the fleet passed into the energy field, everything grew dark. The communication systems went silent. The stars that had once been so clear and brilliant vanished into a fog of distortion. The ship seemed to be moving through a thick veil of darkness, each pulse of energy from Earth shaking their very foundations. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the darkness cleared. The ships emerged into a new space, a space that was not like anything they had known. It was as though they had passed through a gateway into another reality. And there, in the distance, Earth stood silent, its surface covered by structures that had never been seen before, towering over the planet like giants. It was as though humanity had completely transformed its home into something new, something other. The council could only watch in stunned silence, helpless, as they gazed upon the planet. The very people they had once relied on, the ones who had once kept the galaxy in balance, had become something different. The galaxy, now entirely cut off from humanity, stood at the edge of a new and terrifying era. The council watched, helpless, as Earth stood before them, a mystery they could no longer solve. The vast, crystalline hall of the Galactic Council was alive with a tense, buzzing energy. From across the stars, representatives from more than 300 species filled the room. The structure itself seemed to echo their impatience, the walls shimmering with the light of distant galaxies. At the center, floating in the air, was the round, sleek platform where Kira Thorne, humanity's ambassador, was set to speak. There had been whispers, rumors, and nervous glances exchanged for weeks leading up to this moment. Everyone knew that this day would change the future of the galaxy. But what no one knew, not even the highest-ranking members of the council, was that humanity's decision was already made. Kira wasn't here to negotiate. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here because the council had forced her hand, and now they would learn what happens when you push humanity too far. The voices of the delegates quieted as Kira stepped onto the platform. Her uniform was simple, but striking earthy tones that reflected the planet she represented, a stark contrast to the complex, colorful fabrics of the other ambassadors. The council watched her closely, trying to read the emotions hidden beneath her calm, composed expression. They knew humanity had grown in power, influence, and independence, but there was still uncertainty about their ultimate intentions. The human species had gone from a small, unknown race to one of the most influential powers in the galaxy in the last few centuries. Still, the Council wanted more from them. They wanted humanity's loyalty, their integration into the galactic order. They believed that humanity, with its advanced technologies and bold thinking, could be an essential part of their future. Yet there was always something that held them back. Humanity had never fully joined the Council, never fully accepted the way things were done. The chairman of the Council, Volok of the Threx Confederacy, adjusted the ceremonial robes draped over his massive frame and began speaking in his slow, deliberate voice. "Ambassador Thorn," he said, his words echoing through the hall, "we have called upon your people to join us, to unite under the banner of the Galactic Council. For too long, humanity has isolated itself from the rest of us. You have made your advancements, your progress, but without unity, without cooperation, your power will crumble. We have seen this time and time again in the history of the galaxy." His sharp, angular face remained unblinking as he fixed his gaze on Kira. "You have the potential to bring us all into an era of peace and prosperity, yet you continue to stand apart. Why?" Kira's gaze was steady, her posture perfect. She had heard this speech many times before. It was always the same. Humanity, with its unique independence, was seen as a threat to the galactic order. Some wanted to see them subjugated, others merely controlled, while a rare few saw them as equals. But Kira had heard enough of this. She wasn't here to explain herself or her people's choices. She wasn't here to listen to their lectures or try to appease their growing anxiety. The decision had been made, and she was here simply to deliver the news. "I stand here today because you forced me to," Kira said, her voice carrying through the room, calm yet firm. "You want us to join your system. You want us to follow your rules, your treaties, your way of doing things. But what you fail to understand is that we are not like you, and we never will be. Humanity has no place in your vision of unity." Her words hung in the air, heavy with conviction. The room fell silent, the delegates staring at her in shock, their thoughts racing. Chairman Volok's expression darkened, his lips curling slightly. "You misunderstand, Ambassador. We are offering you a place in a future where all species are equal, where your potential can be fully realized. This is not about control. It is about partnership, about moving forward together." His voice was measured, though there was a sharp edge to it now. "Why reject this? Why refuse to be part of something larger than yourselves?" Kira looked around the room, taking in the faces of the other representatives. Some were confused, others clearly angry, but all of them were uncomfortable. They were used to humanity's defiance, to their unwillingness to conform, but they had never seen it quite so direct, quite so final. Kira let the silence linger, knowing that every passing second was making them more uneasy. "We rejected your partnership the moment you asked for it," Kira continued. "You don't want equality. You want control. You want us to conform to your system, to lose the very essence of what makes us human. You want us to abandon our independence in exchange for a seat at your table, where we would be nothing more than another pawn in your endless political games." The tension in the room was palpable now. Volok opened his mouth to speak, but Kira raised a hand, silencing him. She wasn't done. For centuries, humanity has lifted up the galaxy. We've saved worlds, healed species, brought stability to the void between stars, Kira said, her eyes burning with the weight of her words. And every time we did, we asked for nothing in return but respect. But you've never given us that respect. You've only seen us as a tool, a weapon, or a resource. We are not your servants, and we are not your project to be managed. At this, there was a stir among the delegates. Kira could feel the weight of their eyes on her, some uncertain, others afraid. They had heard the rumors, of course, of humanity's growing power and influence, of the massive advancements they had made in technology, defense, and culture. But they had never fully understood the implications. Not until now. "Humanity is walking away," Kira said, her voice calm but heavy with finality. "We're done with your politics, your games, and your false promises. We will chart our own path from now on. You want unity? It's not in the stars with you. It's within ourselves. As Kira turned to leave, the silence in the room deepened, suffocating the council. They had expected diplomacy, negotiation, maybe even a passionate plea. But not this. Not the cold, unyielding declaration that humanity no longer needed them. The door slid open, and Kira walked out without looking back. The council was left behind, watching helplessly as humanity made its decision. The sound of footsteps echoed through the chamber, and for the first time in generations, the council was unsure of their future. What would happen now? What would the galaxy become without humanity's light guiding them? Weeks passed in a heavy, unspoken stillness. The council chamber, once full of heated debates and constant discussions, now felt empty, like a vast echoing cavern. The absence of humanity's presence was felt everywhere. The council had hoped that the shock of Kira's words was temporary, that perhaps a quiet conversation behind closed doors would bring her and her people back to the fold. But there were no words of apology or offers of compromise. Humanity, it seemed, had made its decision. And the galaxy. The galaxy was left to deal with the consequences. Across the known sectors, the ripple effect was undeniable. First, the trade routes began to slow. Ships that had once moved efficiently through human-controlled space now found themselves cut off from the vast, thriving markets Earth and its colonies had nurtured. Once bustling stations in deep space fell silent, their docking bays empty and quiet. The distant hum of human technology, once the lifeblood of interstellar commerce, ceased to pulse through the heart of the galaxy. No one knew how to replace it. On the edge of the Hytrax belt, the mining colonies that relied on human engineers and techs were the first to feel the effects. Without the advanced systems humanity had provided, the ore processors began to fail. Once accurate mining drones now wandered aimlessly, their commands corrupted by a lack of human oversight. The workers, too, struggled. They had no training in the technologies they had taken for granted. What once took hours now stretched into days as they fumbled to fix problems they didn't understand. They could only watch helplessly as the supplies they relied on became more and more unreliable. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, ambassadors sent messages, some pleading, others demanding, to no avail. The communications channels to Earth and the human colonies were eerily quiet. Messages were sent, but none were answered. Desperation began to seep into the words of the ambassadors. They spoke of trade deals and defense agreements, of treaties that needed to be signed, but the silence from Earth only grew thicker. In the council chambers, Valak and the others tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. But it was hard to pretend nothing had changed. The absence of humanity was impossible to ignore. Slowly, they began to realize that the situation was worse than they had imagined. Trade deals meant nothing if the very systems that kept the galaxy functioning began to break down. The technological advancements humans had gifted the galaxy were not just luxury, they were essential. Weeks turned into months, and still, humanity held its distance. The Federation of Velar, a species known for its peaceful philosophy, now found itself at war with the Rethar pirates who had once been kept in check by the human-led peacekeeping fleets. No one could ignore the fact that the balance was beginning to shift. Without humanity, the peace the galaxy had enjoyed seemed fragile, even non-existent. Even species who had always been neutral, who had never had much involvement with Earth, began to feel the effects. It was as if a quiet storm was building, a storm no one had seen coming. Back in the council chambers, whispers filled the air. Some of the delegates were starting to wonder if humanity had truly left for good. There were rumors of massive construction projects taking place in human space, gargantuan structures of unknown purpose, starships being constructed at speeds that made even the most advanced species nervous. Yet, despite these rumors, no one had any solid answers. What was humanity doing? And why were they doing it in such secrecy? Sialek, the mirrored ambassador, watched from the back of the room, his long, spindly fingers tapping nervously against the armrest of his chair. The silence had only grown deeper in the weeks following Kira's departure. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, something was about to happen, but he didn't know what. No one knew. The entire council seemed to hold its breath. Even the once strong sense of unity among the species now seemed fragile, as if everything were about to fall apart at the slightest shift. And then came the first of the new reports. On a quiet, distant colony in the Andromeda sector, an entire mining complex, one that had been using Terran technology for decades, was suddenly offline. A full shutdown. No warning, no explanation. The engineers sent to investigate reported back with conflicting accounts. Some claimed a system malfunction, others claimed it was a deliberate act. But none of them could explain why the human-made systems had simply stopped working. They could not even restart the machines. This wasn't an isolated incident. Over the course of the next few days, more and more reports came in. Entire sections of the galaxy were facing similar issues. Shipyards where human-built vessels were constructed were showing signs of critical failures. The colonies that had been relying on Terran technology for basic survival, water filtration, atmosphere regulation, energy generation, were suddenly facing crises. A tense meeting was called within the council. The representatives of the surviving sectors gathered together, hoping for answers. They had always relied on humanity to fix problems like this, to step in when things broke. But now they were left without anyone to turn to. The human fleets were nowhere to be found. Earth, the beacon of technology and progress, had closed its doors. The galaxy had depended on them, and now the galaxy was falling apart. "The reports are true," Chairman Voloke said, his voice betraying a hint of unease. "Human-made systems are failing across the board. If we don't find a way to fix this, entire colonies could collapse." His voice was cold, but there was an edge of panic behind it. But the question remains, why? Why has humanity withdrawn? Why aren't they helping us? What are they hiding? The mirrored ambassador, Silic, stood slowly, his long, multi-jointed arms waving in the air as he spoke. "We know humanity better than anyone else. They don't act without a reason. They're preparing for something big. We should not just sit here, wondering. We need to find them. We need to know what they're building, and why." But no one had an answer. No one knew where humanity was, or what they were planning. The silence continued to stretch on, and with it, the sense of dread grew. Each passing day made the council more uneasy. The galaxy was slipping into chaos, and with every new failure, the reality of humanity's withdrawal became clearer. The galaxy was falling apart, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it.as. The council continued to deliberate. Another transmission came through from the Hytrax belt, this one marked with urgency. A massive energy pulse had been detected. The source was far beyond anything known in the galaxy. A new kind of power. A power that no one had ever seen before. The signal, originating from a location deep within human space, was unmistakable. Humanity had not just walked away. They were preparing for something. Something that would change everything. The weight of that silence was now unbearable. The galaxy had taken humanity's presence for granted. And now, with the silence settling over them like a heavy fog, they realized they had made a terrible mistake. The galaxy was beginning to feel like an abandoned house, once full of life, now left to decay. The hum of human technology, which had always been a constant, was gone. The stars themselves seemed dimmer, as if they too could feel the absence of the people who had once been at the heart of everything. Humanity had made its decision, and the galaxy was left to grapple with the consequences. The first sign of trouble had been small, almost unnoticed. Trade routes slowed. But soon, the ripple effect turned into waves. It wasn't just the absence of human-made products. It was something deeper. Without human technology, entire systems began to collapse. In the sprawling trade hubs that had once thrived on Terran ingenuity, the markets now lay empty, their terminals blinking with error codes instead of trade data. Ships filled with goods from all corners of the galaxy now floated aimlessly in space, unable to dock, unable to function. The Velar species, once content to live in their peaceful, green city planets, now faced threats they weren't prepared for. The pirates of the Outer Rim, who had long been kept in check by humanity's powerful peacekeeping fleets, grew bolder with each passing day. Their raids became more frequent, more destructive. What had once been a quiet sector of space was now a war zone. But the most terrifying thing wasn't the raids, it was the fact that no one was coming to stop them. The Velar had no one to turn to. They had grown so accustomed to the protection of the human fleets that they never thought about what would happen without them. The Rethar pirates, emboldened by the lack of human military presence, began to spread further into peaceful systems. Whole colonies, once safe from the threat of lawlessness, now found themselves on the edge of chaos. The humans had always maintained peace by force when necessary, but without their fleets patrolling the borders, it seemed there was nothing left to hold the galaxy together. Even the Threx Confederacy, once the most powerful military force in the galaxy before humanity's rise, found itself struggling to maintain order. Their vast fleets, which had once dominated the stars, now seemed like mere shadows of the former glory they had once commanded. Valuk, the chairman of the Galactic Council, sat in his office late at night, staring at the star map. The Threx ships patrolled the galaxy, yes, but their influence was waning. They no longer had the resources or the edge they once did, and it was clear that the galaxy was slipping into a slow descent into disarray. In the farthest reaches of human space, a new report came through from a research station in the Tyrannus system. The station had been built to observe cosmic anomalies, but now its scientists had made an unsettling discovery. The energy signatures from humanity's distant projects had reached a level never before seen in galactic history. The pulse of power radiating from the human systems was unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. It was not just the sudden building of structures or the expansion of military capabilities, there was something more. The station's transmissions were filled with confusion and fear. Something was happening out there, something that no one understood. But one thing was certain, the humans were not leaving, at least, not in the way everyone had assumed. Back in the heart of the galaxy, the Council scrambled to make sense of the growing crisis. Diplomatic missions were dispatched to human-controlled space, but they never returned. No messages, no answers, only silence. The vast network of wormhole gates that connected the galaxy to human space lay dormant, closed off. Every effort to make contact with Earth was met with nothing but a deep, impenetrable void. It was as though humanity had vanished, leaving only the remnants of their once glorious civilization. In the aftermath, the once powerful trade networks began to crumble. The great trade routes that had once connected worlds in a smooth flow of goods now seemed more like forgotten paths through a lost wilderness. Many systems had depended on human resources, whether it was the advanced mining techniques developed by human engineers or the artificial intelligence systems that kept entire sectors running. Without these systems in place, entire colonies found themselves floundering, unable to function as they once had. The Skurin, a race of brilliant archivists and scholars, had been among those who had first noticed the changes. Their research centers, which relied on human-designed data storage systems, began to malfunction. Their most advanced algorithms, built with the help of human software engineers, began to break down. It was a slow process at first, small glitches, minor inconsistencies, but soon the problems became impossible to ignore. The Scorn archives, once a shining example of the galaxy's knowledge, were now filled with corrupted data, scrambled signals, and incomplete records. The very foundation of their civilization was being undone by a technology they had taken for granted. At the same time, the human colonies in the outer reaches of the galaxy had begun to report strange occurrences. Colonies once thriving and self-sufficient now found themselves isolated, with communication lines severed and supplies growing scarce. At first, these events were dismissed as simple technical failures. But as time went on, it became clear that something more was at work. Some speculated that humanity had simply withdrawn from the galaxy out of frustration with the Council, while others feared the worst, that humanity was preparing for something catastrophic. No one knew for sure, but the growing silence from human-controlled space only deepened the sense of unease. On the planet of Zentharia, once a bustling trade hub, the absence of humanity was felt most deeply. Zentharia had always relied on human technology to regulate its atmosphere and water supply, but now those systems were failing. The water purification systems, designed by human engineers, had stopped working, and the planet's atmosphere was slowly becoming more toxic. The citizens of Xantheria had always taken these life support systems for granted. They had never imagined that one day, the people who had made it all possible would simply walk away. Now, with each passing day, the air grew thicker, the water dirtier. And with no help coming from the Council or any other species, the people of Xantheria could only watch as their world fell into crisis. Meanwhile, back on Seraphon Prime, Valak, along with the other council members, found themselves growing more desperate. A few months ago, they had been filled with pride in their unity, in the belief that they could solve any problem together. But now, with the weight of the galaxy's instability pressing down on them, that pride had turned to fear. The Council had always believed that they could control the galaxy, that they could ensure peace through their alliances. But now, without humanity, the galaxy felt out of their reach. Each new report from the outer sectors, each new crisis unfolding in the wake of humanity's departure, made it clearer that the balance of power was shifting. And yet, the greatest fear of all was still unspoken, the unknown. What was humanity preparing? What had they built in the silence that had taken over human space? The rumors of massive energy pulses, strange constructions, and secretive projects sent waves of anxiety through the galaxy. Some whispered that humanity had found something ancient and powerful that could change everything. Others feared they were simply preparing for war, but no one knew for sure. The only certainty was that humanity was gone, and they were no longer part of the galaxy's equation. The galaxy had learned to depend on humanity, and now, in their absence, the galaxy was teetering on the edge of something darker, something no one could predict. The silence had become deafening. The galaxy was teetering on the edge of chaos. Every passing day, the absence of humanity felt more profound, more dangerous. Where once the stars had glowed with the promise of peace, now they flickered dimly in a sea of uncertainty. The Council of Species, once filled with confident leaders and ambassadors, now met in hushed, desperate tones. No one had any answers, and yet everyone felt the growing pressure, the pressure to fix what had been broken. But the truth was undeniable. Without humanity, the galaxy was lost. That IT wasn't just the breakdown of systems or the rise of pirates and lawlessness. It was the fear, the deep, gnawing fear that humanity knew something that the rest of the galaxy didn't. The energy pulses detected in human space, the strange constructions being built, no one could explain it. Theories abounded, but none of them made sense. The galaxy, once a vibrant, interconnected network of peaceful alliances, was now a ticking time bomb. And the clock was running out. In the heart of the Galactic Council's meeting room, Valok, the chairman, sat slumped in his seat, his usually composed face now showing signs of strain. His sharp, elongated features were furrowed in worry. The last few months had been a blur of frantic attempts to contact Earth and its colonies, all of which had been met with nothing. Silence. Nothing but empty space. The humans were gone, or worse, they were preparing for something no one could understand. His thoughts were interrupted by a quiet voice. "We cannot wait any longer." Sialek, the mirrored ambassador, spoke up, his voice echoing through the chamber. His long, multi-jointed arms shifted uneasily, his large compound eyes focused intently on the chairman. "The galaxy cannot survive much longer like this. We are not prepared for what humanity has left behind. We need to find them. We need to plead with them before it's too late." The room fell silent. Every species in the galaxy had always known humanity's role in maintaining the balance of power. The trade routes, the technology, the peacekeeping forces, humanity had been the keystone in this delicate structure. But now, that keystone was gone, and with it, the foundation was crumbling. Sialek's words were not new, but the weight of them felt heavier now than ever before. "I agree," Valak said finally, his voice steady but carrying a weight of urgency. "We've sent ships, messages, even ambassadors, but all we receive is silence. What if they refuse to come back? What if they no longer care for the galaxy?" "No," Sialek responded quickly, his tone sharp. "That's not possible. Humanity does not leave things undone. They would not simply abandon us. There is something else. Something we do not understand. We cannot wait for them to reach out to us. We must reach out to them." The galaxy will fall apart without them. Another voice interrupted. It was Drax, the leader of the Threx Confederacy, his tone harsh and accusatory. We have already begged for their help, and they have ignored us. Every attempt we've made has been met with silence. What makes you think this time will be any different? There is no other choice, Volok said, his voice growing firmer. We have exhausted every option. If humanity is not answering, we need to change our approach. We must make a direct plea, and this time we must do it in person. The room fell into a heavy silence. The idea of sending representatives directly into human space was not just risky, it was dangerous. No one knew what humanity had been doing, what they had been preparing. The last transmissions received from the Tyrannus Research Station spoke of vast energy fields and structures of unknown purpose. The unknown, the fear of what awaited them in the human-controlled sectors, made everyone hesitant. But the truth was undeniable. They had no other choice. We will send a delegation, Velike continued, breaking the silence. We will go to Earth. We will plead for their help. If humanity is preparing something, we need to know. And we need them to know that the galaxy cannot survive without them. There was murmuring among the council members. Sending a delegation to Earth was no small matter. The humans had made it clear that they wanted no part in the galaxy's struggles. But the stakes had never been higher. The peace that had existed for centuries was unraveling, and with it, the stability of the entire galaxy. Everyone knew it, but no one could figure out what to do about it. We don't know where to even begin looking for them, said Taylor, the representative from the Ylthar Federation, her voice uncertain. Human space is vast, and their fleets have disappeared. How do we even know where to start? The location doesn't matter, Psylocke replied, his voice urgent. We have to go to Earth. We have to beg them for their help. If they are preparing something, we need to understand what it is. We need their knowledge, their strength. Volok nodded slowly. I agree. The situation is dire. We have no more time for hesitation. The galaxy needs humanity. Without them, we face disaster. As the council continued to debate the logistics of the mission, Volok's mind raced. The mission was risky, yes, but it was the only chance they had left. The silence from Earth had become unbearable. The thought of a galaxy without humanity was unthinkable. And yet, that was the reality they were facing. No longer could they pretend that everything would be fine without them. The galaxy had relied too heavily on human technology, human ingenuity, human peacekeepers. Now, everything was breaking down. But there was still hope. There had to be. The final decision was made. The Council would send a fleet, a delegation of representatives from each species, to Earth. It would be a last-ditch effort to understand what had happened, to reach out to humanity, and, if necessary, to beg for their help. The hope was fragile, like a flickering light in a storm, but it was the only hope they had left. As the fleet prepared to depart, the weight of the situation hung heavy in the air. No one knew what they would find when they reached human space. Would they find the humans they once knew, the civilization that had built the galaxy? Or would they find something darker, something that would change everything? The questions lingered, but there was no time for answers. The fleet departed, slipping into the vast unknown, carrying the galaxy's last hope. And all they could do was wait. The galaxy had never felt so small. The once vast and connected systems that stretched across the stars now seemed distant, unreachable, and fragile. The fleet of the Galactic Council had finally arrived in human space, but the journey had been long and filled with uncertainty. Every moment, every second, the leaders and representatives aboard the fleet had hoped for a sign, any sign that humanity had not abandoned them completely. But as the ships entered the silence of human space, it became clearer with each passing moment that they were entering a realm of shadows. The once thriving space stations were silent, their lights dimmed and their ports locked tight. There was no communication, no welcoming fleet. Just empty space. The Council watched helplessly as the fleet drifted deeper into the heart of human-controlled space. No one could understand why humanity had chosen to disappear so completely. What had happened? Where had the people gone? The energy pulses they had detected earlier only seemed to grow stronger, but still, there were no answers. No response from Earth. No answer to their desperate pleas. Velok, sitting in the command center of the lead ship, looked at the screen in front of him, his eyes narrowed with a growing sense of dread. The image of the vast, empty expanse was all that greeted them. His heart sank. It had been the hope of the Council that humanity would be waiting, that some form of contact would have been made before they arrived. But now, even as the Council fleet approached the center of human space, it felt as though they were walking into the unknown, into a place where time and space no longer held meaning. "We should be nearing Earth's orbit soon." The voice of the fleet commander came over the comms, but the words offered little comfort. Velok could hear the uncertainty in the commander's voice as well. The fleet had been prepared for many outcomes, but not this one. No one had expected that Earth would remain so eerily silent. The sensors picked up faint traces of human activity, just enough to suggest that some form of life remained, but no ships, no signals, no communications. It was as though humanity had withdrawn into some sort of hidden refuge, or worse, was no longer there at all. "We are not getting through, Silik," the mirrored ambassador spoke up, his voice shaky but resolute. "The scanners are picking up nothing. Earth should be there, but it's not. Something is wrong. The humans, where are they?" Velok turned slowly towards Silik, his expression hardening. "We keep looking. We have to keep looking. We cannot turn back now." Every passing minute felt like an eternity. The Council's fleet moved slowly through the silence, drifting closer to Earth, but with each passing moment, the hope that had once filled them all began to erode. The situation was far worse than anyone had anticipated. Earth, the beating heart of the galaxy, was not responding. As the fleet reached the outskirts of Earth's system, Velok's eyes widened. There, before them, a vast energy field surrounded Earth. It was like nothing they had ever seen before. It pulsed with a strange, unnatural rhythm, each wave of energy causing the very space around them to bend and warp. The shields on the ships flickered in response to the power, sending sparks of static throughout the communication systems. There was no doubt now, humanity had created something enormous, something powerful. But what was it? Why had they built it? What is this? Drax, the leader of the Threx Confederacy, growled, his voice filled with suspicion and fear. "Is this a weapon? A defense system? What are they hiding?" The Council had no answers, and the silence that followed only deepened the sense of dread in the hearts of all those aboard. There were no ships coming to meet them. There were no welcoming signals. The galaxy had relied on humanity for centuries, trusted them, depended on them, but now, it seemed as if they were locked behind an invisible wall, unwilling to share their secrets. "We have to get through it," Velok said, trying to steady his own nerves, his mind racing. "We have to find out what this is. We cannot afford to wait any longer."